Hi. Hopefully I'll get this to work. I've been dealing with some technical issues and I'm definitely not technically savvy. But anyway, I'm here and I am so excited to bring you this sermon. Well, okay, actually, all afternoon I've been begging God, please, do I have to? Do I have to? Please, I don't want to. But he's kind of said, yeah, you need to. So I'm like, okay, I'll give it a go. Actually, he kind of told me a year and a half ago to do it. And I've been making excuses since, which, as you will see from the sermon, is highly ironic, since it's kind of about what excuses we make for not using the gifts that God has given us. Yeah. Anyways, so I'm here today. I'm not a preacher. This is my first sermon, so bear with me. I'm a preacher's kid, but I don't think that really rubbed off on me. I like to listen to preachers, but I'm discovering that it's actually a lot harder to preach than it sounds like. So, yeah. But I think I'm stalling. So I better get this show on the road. We're going to be talking about Matthew 25:14 through 30 today. The parable of the talents. If you will turn there with me, pull it up on your Bible app, do what you got to do. I'm going to pull it up on my phone. I'm going to try if my phone will cooperate. We've been having internet issues, but we're going to give it a try. Now, I like to use the New Living Translation because it's nice and modern, and I'm a modern kind of gal. But you can use whatever translation you want. And actually, in some of the older translations, they refer to the money that the master gives as talents, which is why this is called the parable of the talents. In my version, it said silver. So, but the silver, talents, same thing. Matthew 25:14. Again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities. He then left on his trip. The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. The servant with 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. After a long time, their master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they had used his money. The servant to whom he had entrusted the 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, "Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 5 more." The master was full of praise. "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." The servant who had received the 2 bags of silver came forward and said, "Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 2 more." The master said, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." Then the servant with 1 bag of silver came and said, "Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here's your money back." But the master replied, "You wicked and lazy servant! If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it." Then he ordered, "Take the money from this servant and give it to the one with the 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Now throw this useless servant into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So what I want to ask you today is, what gifts has your master left you with? When God put you on this earth, what gifts did he give you? No. I know a lot of you are going to say, I don't have any gifts. Or my gifts aren't important. I don't want to hear that. Because, yeah, maybe you didn't get the 5 bags of silver. Maybe you didn't get the 2. But it was the 1 bag of silver, the servant with the 1 bag of silver, who incurred the wrath of the master. Not because he didn't have much, but because he didn't do anything with what he had. So I'm asking you today, because everybody has something. What do you have? You might not have any money. You might not even have a house over your head. I mean, a roof over your head. Sorry, not a house. That would hurt. You might not have a roof over your head. You might not know where your next meal is coming from. But you do have a gift. What is it? If you don't know, ask the people who know you well, because I will bet you they know. And I want you to think about it. I want you to think about it as we go through this sermon. Because it is really crucially important that you know what God has given you so that you can use it to its fullest. And that's not the purpose of what I'm going to talk to you about today. And there may be a time when I will discuss that, and we'll talk over that, because there are a lot of passages in Scripture. Paul addressed it a lot, about the different gifts that God has given each and every one of us. But we're not going to talk about that today. But I want you to think about it. Maybe you're musically talented. Maybe you have the gift of encouragement. Maybe you know how to sew. Maybe you're great at working with your hands. A great carpenter. Maybe you know how to make jewelry. Maybe you know how to speak 2 or 3 languages. The list is incredibly long of what gifts God has given to his people. Where do you fit on that list? Be thinking about that. What is your gift? Now I want to ask you, what would have happened if David, you know the shepherd David, if David had been on that list of servants, if David had been like the servant with the 1 bag of silver, if he had taken the gifts that God had given him and had buried them in the dirt, what would have happened? Let's take a look at 1 Samuel 17. That's where the story of David and Goliath is. Okay? So let's pull it up. By pull it up, I mean I pull it up on my phone, but you can turn to it in your Bible. 1 Samuel 17. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's kind of a long passage. But most of us know the story. David was a young shepherd. He was the youngest of 8 boys. He was a good-looking kid, but he was the baby. He had 7 older brothers, and they went off to war. The Israelites at the time were fighting against the Philistines. And it says that David's father sent him to bring to bring supplies to his brothers who were fighting the Philistines. So David gets to the camp, and this is what takes place. Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor-bearer walked ahead of him carrying a shield. Now, can you imagine, as a kid, as a boy, a mere shepherd, the sight of this 9-foot giant stepping out? How terrifying that must have been to him. And Goliath taunts the Israelites. Why are you all coming out to fight? I am the Philistine champion, but you are only the servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me a man who will fight me. When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. So David comes down and he sees this, and he says, wait a minute. How dare he say that against the armies of the Lord? And he says, what's the reward for getting this guy, basically? Or is there a reward? And they say, yeah, there is a reward. But his brother, his oldest brother, says basically, who do you think you are? Go take care of those few sheep. What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and your deceit. You just want to see the battle. And David responds, what have I done now? I was only asking a question. And then Saul sends for David because he heard about him asking for the question about Goliath. And David says, don't worry about this giant. I'll go take care of him. And then Saul says, the king, says, don't be ridiculous. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man since his youth. Okay, so David sees this. He knows he has skills because he's been watching the sheep, taking care of the sheep. He's been using his sling to fight the bears and the lions and all of this. And he wants to use these skills to defend the army of the Lord. First thing that comes up, his oldest brother. Who do you think you are, you puny little brother? And then the king of the entire country basically says, your boy, he's a man, kind of a big man, kind of a very big man. Yeah, no, But David says, I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats. When a lion or bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do this to the pagan Philistine too, for he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. So David had reasons. He had a lot of excuses that he could have used. He was too young. Nobody would have faulted him for that. He was inferior to almost every single warrior that was over there. He wasn't even old enough to be in the army as it was. He was still tending the sheep, and all of his brothers were the ones who were fighting in the army. The king didn't believe in him. His brother didn't believe in him. If he had listened to all of those excuses and said, you know what, never mind, I'm not going to use my gifts. They're really not that big of a deal anyway. What do you think would have happened? How do you think that battle would have turned out? Would God have gotten the glory that day? What would have happened to the nation of Israel? Because one young boy had decided that his gifts just weren't big enough, didn't amount to enough. One sling, 5 stones, he killed a giant. How many giants are still out there because you've decided that your gifts aren't enough? How many giants are still out there because your sling is sitting on the shelf? Because your rocks are in your pocket? Because you listened to your brother or your mother or your father or your friend who said, you are not good enough, go back to your sheep? How many giants did you listen to? How many kings did you believe when they told you you are but a boy and he is a man? How many giants are still out there because you listened to the excuses and you buried your silver? What are you doing with your talent? Now let's look at John 6. We've got another little boy. And this is another familiar story to many people. Not quite as familiar as David and Goliath, but still, it's up there. Except that I thought I had loaded it on my phone for easy access, and I didn't. So I'm going to type it in here quickly. John 6, verses 1 through 14. And this is going to be when Jesus feeds the 5,000. And hopefully my internet will work and it will load quickly. Actually, I may be able to pull it up right here. Okay. John 6. After this, Jesus crossed over to the far side of the Sea of Galilee, also known as the Sea of Tiberias. A huge crowd kept following him wherever he went because they saw his miraculous signs as he healed the sick. Then Jesus climbed a hill and sat down with his disciples around him. It was nearly time for the Jewish Passover celebration. Jesus soon saw a huge crowd of people coming to look for him. Turning to Philip, one of his disciples, he asked, "Where can we buy bread to feed all these people?" He was testing Philip, for he already knew what he was going to do. Philip replied, "Even if we worked for months, we wouldn't have enough money to feed them." Then Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up, "There's a young boy here with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what good is that with this huge crowd?" "Tell everyone to sit down," Jesus said. So they all sat down on the grassy slopes. The men alone numbered about 5,000. Then Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks to God, and distributed them to the people. Afterwards he did the same with the fish, and they all ate as much as they wanted. After everyone was full, Jesus told his disciples, "Now gather the leftovers so that nothing is wasted." So they picked up the pieces and filled 12 baskets with scraps left by the people who had eaten from the 5 barley loaves. When the people saw him do this miraculous sign, they exclaimed, "Surely he is the prophet we have been expecting." So tell me, what about this boy? What about him? What excuses could he have made? Again, he's in a crowd with 5,000 men, not counting the women and children. And they're looking for food. Now, honestly, if I were in that situation, I don't know that I would have volunteered my food. Because I probably would have said, they're going to laugh at me. They're going to laugh at me. They want to feed 5,000 men plus women and children, and all I have is 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish? Like, that's even going to be enough for one family. I'm not even going to bother. It's not even going to be a drop in the bucket. Why would I bother? The need is so big. What difference is my little contribution going to make? What difference is my little gift going to make when the need is so big? What difference? You tell me. What difference did his little gift make that day? What difference can your little gift make when it's combined with the plan of God? What difference can your tiny talent make when it's combined with the power of the living Jesus Christ? When you bury it under the dirt, it doesn't make any difference at all. But when you use it, when you put it out there, when you invest it, you can sit back and watch God use it in ways that you never, ever imagined. What if that little boy had said, "I'm too young"? I'm sure there's a mom or a dad out here who will step up to the plate. I'm sure there's someone who has more. I have so little. I don't want them to laugh at me. Thousands, tens of thousands, if you count the women and children, would have gone hungry that day. The power of God would not have been shown if he had buried what he had. What are you burying? What are you hiding? Where is your silver today? Is it being used? Is it being multiplied? Or is it buried in your garden? Are you sitting on it? Is it festering? Hmm. I'm going to confess something to you. Yeah, I'm a pastor's kid. But sometimes, when I read the Bible, I think, yeah, but they were Bible people. They weren't real people. I mean, I know they were real people, but not really. You know, they were real people, but they're in the Bible, so it's not really the same thing. If you know what I mean. Yeah, I think you know what I mean. Well, I have a story to tell you. A little while back, my husband and I went through some tough times. Well, our whole family did. I was diagnosed with cancer, and we were at a time in our lives when we were very, very alone. We we had left our former church, and we were starting over, and we had virtually no friends. We were hundreds of miles away from our family, and we walked into this new church. It was 2 weeks after my diagnosis. And the people there embraced us and loved us. And I had surgery 2 weeks. I had surgery 2 weeks after we started attending this church. And there was a woman there who spent the night with me. I ended up having a couple surgeries. And both times, she stayed the night at the hospital with me. Because we had family far, our family wasn't there with us, and we had no friends at the time. She stayed the entire night. All night long. She fed me ice chips. She made sure that I got my medicine on time. She made sure they stayed on top of my pain meds. A perfect stranger. But the gift, and I say that in quotes, the gift that she had was that she was a breast cancer survivor as well. And she had the gift of mercy. She had been through it. She knew what it was like. And she ministered to me. And she ministered to Jason, my husband. And along with her, the rest of the church came by us. They brought us meals. People we didn't know, again. They watched our children. Some people used their finances and hired a housekeeper to help clean our home. Some people used their gift with children and watched our children. Another woman started this was not at the church, but she, over at Emmanuel Hospital, started a therapy group for children whose family members had cancer. She used her gift. My aunt, over in Oregon, got each woman in the family to decorate a square of a quilt for me. Some put scriptures on there, some wrote different things, and then she sewed them together into a quilt and mailed it to me because they couldn't be there to hug me in person, so she mailed me a quilt. Dozens and dozens and dozens of people use their gift of encouragement, their gift of time, to mail us cards. And ironically, we came into the cancer wounded, struggling, angry with God and wondering and so hurt. And He used the gifts of His people and the love of His people during that cancer to heal us. And I don't think that the people who brought us meals knew that they were healing a broken heart. I don't think that the people who were watching my children knew that they were restoring a crumbling faith. But they were using the gifts that they had been given and allowing God to work through them. They did not bury their silver. They invested it. They invested it in us. And they watched us grow and heal and change. What is your gift? What do you have today? Not what will you have tomorrow. Not what does your cousin have. Not what do you wish you have. What do you have today? What have you been given? And what are you doing with it? What are you doing with yourself